They say a father is like a pillar that never shakes, no matter how hard the storm hits. He gives his children his time, his youth, and every ounce of his strength until there is nothing left for himself. He works through the exhaustion, he works through the pain, and he makes sacrifices that no one ever sees. He carries the weight of the world on his shoulders in absolute silence, just so his family can have a reason to smile. But the world doesn't tell you about the deepest kind of pain a father can ever endure. It is the pain of realizing that the child you raised with all your heart has become the very person who breaks it. This is not a fairy tale. This is the harsh, hidden reality of many elderly parents living in the quiet suburbs of America today. My name is Robert Miller. At 72 years old, I find myself looking back at a life spent as a humble public school teacher. I was never a man of great wealth, but I was rich in ways money could never define. I had a modest home and a wife named Margaret, who was the heartbeat of my existence. That house wasn't a mansion, but to me, every brick and every floorboard was priceless. Inside those walls, we didn't just live, we built a lifetime of memories. I still remember the smell of the coffee Margaret made every morning, and the way the sunlight hit the kitchen floor. And then there was Daniel, our only son, our pride and our joy. We gave him everything, believing that one day, when our hair turned gray, our son would be the one to catch us. We were so sure of it, but we were tragically wrong. Life changed in a heartbeat when Margaret fell ill. Then came the cold hospital rooms, the long, terrifying nights, and the silence of the heavens. I will never forget her final day. Her voice was barely a whisper when she squeezed my hand and said, "Robert, please, promise me you won't be alone." And just like that, she closed her eyes, and the light of my world went out forever. Daniel showed up for the funeral, but he stood there like a stranger. No hug, no kindness, just a cold, distant look. Weeks turned into months. The house became a tomb of silence. Daniel stopped visiting. He stopped calling. I spent every evening sitting by the front window, watching the driveway, hoping to see his car turn in. Then, one cold night, the front door finally opened. Daniel walked inside. For a moment, my heart felt light. I stood up with a shaky smile, ready to welcome my son home. But he didn't look at me with love. He looked around at the house as if he were calculating its value. Then he spoke the words that I will carry like a scar until the day I die. He said, "Dad, we need to talk about the house, because I've made some decisions." When I heard those words from Daniel, a strange and cold fear entered my heart, a fear I had never felt before. My voice trembled as I looked into his eyes and asked, "What do you mean? Talk about the house, son." He sat down in front of me, but there was no warmth on his face, no guilt in his eyes, and absolutely no emotion. There was only a heavy, suffocating silence before he finally spoke the words that broke me. He said, "Dad, we need to sell this house. We need to let it go." The glass in my hand slipped and fell, shattering on the floor, just like my world was shattering in that moment. For a second, I thought I had heard him wrong. I whispered, "This house? Daniel, this house is our whole life. It is all I have left of your mother." But his face remained like stone, and he told me that the house was of no use to me anymore. He said I was alone, that I was too old to maintain it, and every word felt like a sharp knife being driven into my chest. I told him softly, "I may be alone, Daniel, but I am still alive, and this is my home. This is where we became a family." Then he pushed a file toward me, a set of legal papers that made my eyes blur and my hands begin to shake uncontrollably. There, at the bottom of the page, was my own signature, and I shouted in disbelief. How is this even possible? Daniel looked away, unable to meet my gaze, and said that a few months ago, while Mom was dying in the hospital, I had signed them myself. And then the memory hit me like a wave of fire. Those painful hospital days when I was broken, crying, and unable to think clearly. I remembered the papers he told me were just insurance forms, papers I signed because I trusted my son more than I trusted myself. I sank to the floor, feeling everything inside me collapse, realizing that my own blood had stolen my trust and my future. Through hot tears, I asked him, "Daniel, I was the one who taught you how to walk, and today, are you really throwing me out of my own home?" He answered in a voice as cold as ice, "Dad, this is just business. I need the money." In that devastating moment, I finally understood the truth. I had not lost a son. I had raised a complete stranger. A few days later, I packed my entire life into one old weathered bag. My wife's photographs, a few clothes, and the memories that no one could ever take away. I walked through every room one last time, touching the same walls and the same doors where Margaret used to laugh. I touched the kitchen wall and whispered, "I am not leaving you. I am being torn away from you by the hands I once held." I moved into a tiny, cramped, rented room with no garden, no front porch, and no peace, only a deafening silence. Every night I stared at the ceiling and wondered, is this what old age becomes? Do we all eventually become a burden to the ones we love? Months later, the ugly truth finally surfaced. Daniel had been drowning in debt. He had lost his job, and the bank was hunting him down. He chose the easiest path he could find, his father's home, his father's life savings, and his father's dignity. He sold it all to save himself. I was filled with a burning anger. But more than that, I felt a heartbreak that words can never describe. Then one day, there was a quiet knock at my door, and when I opened it, Daniel was standing there, looking broken and defeated. There were real tears in his eyes this time as he sobbed. "Dad, I lost everything. The house, the money, my peace. Please forgive me." I stood there in the doorway, a storm of pain and memories raging inside my heart, looking at the man who had ruined my life. Then I said softly, "You did not take my house, Daniel. You broke my heart, and that is something money can never fix." He burst into tears, and for the first time in years, I saw true regret on his face. So I reached out and embraced him. Because a father's heart can be broken, it can be shattered into 1,000 pieces, but it never learns how to hate its own child. Today, I still live alone, but I live in peace, having learned the most painful lesson of all. A person can survive losing a house, but when a child changes into a stranger, the soul is wounded forever. If your parents are still alive, love them, honor them, and hold them close while you still can. Because one day, the house will be gone, the voices will fade, and you may find yourself speaking only to a silent photograph.